A-1
steak
Studios.
sauce. That's not funny.
Aniplex.
Okay, if you don't know, David, what is A1 Studios Pictures responsible for in the anime places?
Becoming a modern day Studio Period.
No, what shows, so people know.
Well, all the way back to the Persona animes, and most recently, the god-awful, through their Cloverworks Studios and Aniplex partnerships, the god-awful adaptation of fucking Promised Neverland. And
I wouldn't call
also,
it god-awful, just sadly not as good as the manga.
no, god-awful.
I mean, he
God-
thinks that.
And the abomination of an adaptation of Sword Art Online.
Now that one, yes. So we find a pattern, David and I, and that pattern is, at least for me, they're like good at
Can we not
things.
be cancer?
Sure. What I find is that like they're somehow able to like pump all this budget into like beautiful animation, phenomenal voice acting, phenomenal music, but they just, somewhere along the line, someone's like, hey guys, I have an idea. Let's not follow the pacing of the manga at all.
No, they're that hipster bro that's like,
Someone in the studio is like, no, we know better.
No, we know better. Bitch, I will put my joint out on your eyeball.
Oh, that's so specific. But yeah, so like we just kind of wanted to generally talk about their studio and how it really is a thing that they do with all of them. So I guess, did you want to start with for you? I know Sword Art Online was kind of the beginning of the hatred because he actually is a fan of the novels. Like, what did you want to talk about how they kind of wrecked that shit?
First, I want to give them credit where credit's due. I'm not going to be a complete cunt the entire video. I will give them credit on adapting up until the Sword Art Online era rather faithfully, or as faithful as the ratings would allow. Well, I guess Fairy Tail for you, Red, is where they kind of lost you.
I didn't realize I did Fairy Tail until I was looking it up. Now, I have my issues with Fairy Tail, but one of the things that bothered me always about the anime was that, and I think this was because of the time slot that it was in, but they basically, anything that was blood or anything, like for example, if someone was shot with a gun or stabbed with a sword, they'd change it to a magic blast. Like, they just literally could not have blood or piercing or anything. And that shit annoyed the fuck out of me, and it was just very
copious amounts of fan service. A-okay.
No. Listen, in America, this is how I've always liked to. In America, blood, guts, gore, brains, organs, totally fine. You even have that Invader Zim episode where Zim was fucking sucking up an organ like a spaghetti noodle. That's fine. But a little bit of cleavage stopped the fucking presses. Meanwhile, in Japan, it's the exact opposite. Just full-on tits everywhere. You can have a straight-up kid, like a show that's airing in a kid's time slot, like Kobayashi. Fucking, there's scenes where there's like a big titty dragon lady harassing like a 5-year-old boy. No, that's fine in Japan, but like you can't have a speck of blood.
Big titty dragon lady.
That's what, bro. Have you seen that shit?
I have, dude.
Yeah. Point being,
I absolutely love that show.
It is great. The standards are different. And in Japan, just no blood, apparently. Or blood is harder to get away with. So, unless you have a time slot.
What annoys me here in that regard is we have that polar opposite in America, especially on cable television. God forbid we don't mix the two. Game of Thrones.
It's very strange. See, this isn't like I'll end it off on this because this is a whole separate video, and this is kind of straying away from the topic of A1. But yeah, no, in America we're very and luckily this is changing as the new generations get less fucking conservative about this kind of thing. But for a long time in America, we were very conservative about sexuality. We didn't want to talk about it and stuff, and that led to, in my mind, a lot of problems. I think when you're not open about that kind of stuff, it leads to developmental issues and more things like sexual assault and stuff because people aren't taught properly. But anyway, let's focus on A1. What did you want us to talk about there? You want to talk about the Sword Art Online stuff?
Well, I was getting to on fucking like the violence and shit on Fairy Tail. It was like I think a lot of that was the time slot, like you said. But also, we had shit like Persona airing in earlier time slots, and that's pretty violent.
Maybe it has to do with the channel it's on as well. I'm not sure.
It could be, and that's where Japan's cable gets really, really wonky.
Yeah.
Like fucking
what's
TV Tokyo.
The HBO of Japan?
TV Tokyo, you know, you got fucking Dragon Ball Z, you got shit like that, and fucking a lot of these other things are on channels I never personally heard of. Probably because I never grew up in Japan. I'm sure some of our viewers on this video have and can break it down a little more, like all the different like regulations per channel and how their cable's regulated versus ours. But here in America, like we have shows like Sword Art Online on fucking Adult Swim on Cartoon Network, which is technically premium, but technically not premium. And we have shit like fucking on the polar opposite end of shit. We have Game of Thrones on cable package where we got dicks and tits flopping around and copious amounts of blood. And we can have shit like that and, you know, OVAs over in Japan because they're just direct to video and stuff like that's handled a lot better, even from a studio like fucking A-1. Like, for example, remember, you know, I went personally to go see the fucking Sword Art Online movie in theaters. And I was blown away with how much, you know, violence and fucking, you know, how well they told the story in that. You know, and how they were able to tell a completely independent story, OVA style, but at the same time, it was, you know, violent, it was gritty, it was, you know, fucking beautifully animated. It had everything that Sword Art Online should be, and an adaptation itself, because this story isn't just, oh, a harem, and oh, this is a fucking, there's tits over here, and, you know, we got, you know, a little slightly gropey scene over here.
So I assume what we're getting to is that the main issue with A1, at least in my regard, or in my opinion, is the pacing thing. Like, or pacing slash just changing random details.
The pacing, like, they've cut entire segments of arcs that are crucial to plot just to focus more on, like, well, we know what sells over here in Japan. Sex sells because we have this, you know, over-regulated bullshit for... you know, seriously, look into that shit. It's bizarre how they handle porn versus, you know, fan servicey anime.
Yeah, well, it seems to me like A1 and Cloverworks and all of them, they seem to over rely on the flashiness of their animation. Like, their animation is like so pristine and stuff, but like,
that's why I was comparing it kind of like to Period. Like, look at the fucking Bleach anime.
Yeah, animated phenomenally for the most part. There's scenes that aren't as good, but like that like when you compare the Bleach anime to like the One Piece anime, for example, like the Bleach anime, even though it was one of the big three, like it had a much more consistent level of quality.
Yeah.
But like what's interesting about A1, like I said though, is that like you can like isolate like any fight from any A1 Studios anime.
Oh, yeah.
And like you'll look at it and it's like, this is well done. But what I find is that a lot of their fights don't have substance to it. And what I mean by that is it's a lot of eye candy, but not a lot of substance, right? So like you take like a JoJo fight or a Hunter x Hunter fight, like that's a fight that's like strategy based, and it's like really, there's a lot of stuff packed into those fights, whereas an A1 Studio fight, it's like, look at how flashy and shiny and how many flips they're doing, you know? And
see, that's what annoys me.
It's like the cocaine of anime.
Like, you look at, you know, scenes that are pivotal, like, you know, even...
I was hoping for a t-shirt there. I thought you'd laugh at it, and then it could be a t-shirt. Thanks, you ruined it.
I mean, you're not wrong. And that's what I'm getting to here. Is like, look at pivotal scenes in fucking anime from them. Like, you have one of the most notably flashy scenes in all of fucking A1's productions portfolio, the Starburst stream scene. You have that. You have that. It is nothing but flash, and look at how we can direct rays of light. This is how we can do all this shit. Yeah. Look at the Shelter music video for Porter Robinson. That is something that they produced. Look at shit like that. Look at fucking even Seven Deadly Sins scenes. Fucking anything with Meliodas in it, in that fight, is the most god tier fucking animation. But it's
Did they do Seven Deadly Sins?
They did.
So yeah,
I'm literally looking right at their fucking list of shit that they've done here.
Yeah, then like that just proves our point that we're making, because like I heard that they took something that was supposed to be way longer and more drawn out and fucked it up.
The Escanor fight broke me for the anime. Okay, yeah. I dropped it after that because that is so much more than what they did. That is goddamn near 10 chapters of plot build up on a Goku Frieza level. And they took it and made it into a fucking single episode.
See, it pisses me off because this is why A1 Studios is so frustrating to me. It's like they get so close to doing something good. And I'm going to transfer over to The Promised Neverland, which, just in case you know, Cloverworks is an offshoot of them, so it's basically the same people. The Promised Neverland, they do the same thing. You know, animation's marvelous. They have really, really good music, really, really good voice acting. To
the point where it detracts from the anime itself.
Well, here's what detracts it from me, right? And I made this point in our original video on this, and I'm going to say it again. What they did is they made the arbitrary bullshit random ass choice to completely strip out all inner dialogue. And what that does is like, how do you do, at least in the first episode, I didn't watch past the first episode, but in the first episode, they strip out all inner dialogue. So everything that Emma is narrating in her head had to either be cut out completely or said out loud. So that makes it feel very disjointed. They also ruin any semblance of suspense at all. So like in the manga, the twist comes out of nowhere because there's no eerie music playing, there's no fucking creepy zoom-ins on the fucking gate, none of that. It's just oh, here's my average little day. And since it's a manga, there's there's nothing creepy happening. You're just like, oh, you're reading, it's nothing. Oh my god, Whereas the anime just drew it out so much and removed any semblance of telling the story in a coherent way because shit that was once said in her head had to be said out loud. So my main point here is what I find with A1 Studios is that they constantly just make these arbitrary decisions like they think they know that they're what's better for the series, better than the actual author, and I don't understand why. It's a consistent thing with them. They do it with every project they do, at least the ones I've seen.
So here's what else they've done. They didn't focus on Mama's number at all. Which is a huge plot twist. They have cut and pasted shit from fucking chapters 5 through 15 and put them into this like piecemeal.
So they're just changing the order and shit?
Well, what they're doing is kind of like Hunter x Hunter style of like the narrator way. Like, okay, here's the sequence of events. Here's boom, 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 boom. Like the fuck. At least that's what it seems like to me. Is they're trying to emulate here because that's what was super successful for Seven Deadly Sins. Is like the fucking Chimera Ant arc. Here's same time kind of shit, right? So like the Ray and Emma and Norman shit's going on, and then we got the Dawn and Gilda shit going on, and they're trying to piece that together. Like, okay, this is the time. So we're going through that shit, but to such a degree that it feels disjointed, right? We're having shit that's going on in the background, like, okay, here's Phil and them doing, supply gathering and all. It's just like a fucking mess, dude.
So similar to how, in Sword Art Online, the fact that they kind of just skip from like floor 15 to 99 or however the fuck they did that, right? Like, disjointed. It takes a premise that could have been this nice, long, well drawn out, well developed thing, and it kind of just fucks it. Like, takes
well,
I
mean,
plot.
even the light novels kind of skipped over floors and they're filled in with side stories, right? So like even that I was like, okay, so because of how they originally released the fucking light novel for Sword Art Online is like it was a web novel and then it got serialized, kind of like the web comic for One Punch Man. So, like, he skipped over plots in case he got picked up, but at the same time, it was still more coherent than what we got in a fucking anime. And then once it got serialized, like, here's a side story, here's a side story, here's a side story. But, and in the novels, like, now they're, after they're serialized, they're kind of, more filled in properly. Like, this is how it went down, blah, 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 blah. But at the time of adaptation, a lot of that shit was serialized. Like some of them were put in like volumes 2 and 3, and what they had started it on was volume 1 here in America.
Okay.
But it was fucking bizarre. But at the same time, like now that we have all the shit fucking serialized, what I'm hoping for from a more competent studio, which will probably never happen, is like the Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood style shit.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I hope they do with
Bones.
Promised
Neverland.
So,
like, the two seen as kind of like the best anime studios is Bones and Madhouse. And unfortunately, from what I've heard, Madhouse kind of fell apart, which is really sad to me. But like
Well, it fell
Madhouse,
apart because of internal conflict, I think, is what happened,
I'd have to
right?
look it up. I actually don't know. But like all I know is that like I've heard animators like talk, because I follow a lot of animators on stream, and whenever Madhouse is brought up, they talk about how they're not good anymore. Like something happened to them, they fell from grace. But like Hunter x Hunter days Madhouse, One Punch Man days Madhouse was like god tier. Same with Studio Bones is still god tier. So those are like kind of like the ones you want to look to, because they hit that perfect balance of beautiful animation and perfect pacing and
David
adaptation.
Productions for fucking JoJo.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that,
shit
them
like
too. Yeah, a good
French
adaptation.
Bread. Fucking. There's so many studios that are fucking better than A1, and what sucks is, and Red, I think you can agree with me here, is Period and A1 seem to pick up the scraps.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And when they pick up the scraps, it's either very, very good or it's very, very bad. And we see, I hate to bring Period into this video, but what I absolutely despise this past season, and if Thurman was in here, I wanted to bring this point up because of him, is they touted the living fuck out of the demon form Asta. And it was probably some of the most overhyped bullshit animation I've ever seen in my life.
I've heard that there were moments of Black Clover that were animated really well.
The demon form was animated well for what it was, but at the same time, it was nowhere on par with a Bones or a Madhouse or anything that they try to hype it up to be as like some of the best modern animation in existence.
Well, was it
they kept using that as a tagline, and that's what annoyed me. Is like, this is not good. This is good for Period.
Yeah. I was gonna say with Period, I have a question. Right? Do you remember that fight I showed you in Boruto, where it was Sasuke and Naruto fighting against Momoshiki?
Yeah, Momoshiki.
That shit was fucking phenomenal.
That was better. That was better than what they were touting as the best.
Something about Naruto, the Naruto series, they really put a lot of emphasis into the fight scenes in Naruto. And that's the thing, right? Like, I think what we can learn from this is that like every studio has their own way of doing stuff, their own style, and like so with Bones, like they kind of hit that perfection mark. With Period, they have phenomenal fight animation but shitty pacing. With but like shitty pacing in a different direction. Period has shitty pacing in the sense that they draw everything out, whereas A1 is like opposite Period, where they have good fight. Like Period is good fight, longer pacing. A1 is good fight, shorter pacing. It's very interesting. You can make like a Venn diagram of like studios and where they fall on like the political compass of anime adaptations.
Here's what I will give A1 credit for. What they have done this season with Sword Art Online, as much as I hate how much they've left out, they have successfully created one of the most suspenseful arcs they could out of what is legally allowed on Japanese television. And what is definitely allowed on their time slot. And that's bringing back into this, the regulations thing. Like, even Reki brought in, like, I don't use, sexual assault as a plot device anymore. I don't use, anything like that. He doesn't utilize that, and he apologized to the voice actresses who had to voice that scene because it took viewers, for a surprise. Kind of like Goblin Slayer got to the fucking level of, we have to put a trigger warning at the beginning of the fucking first episode because of how much, sexual assault was in that, from the fucking Goblin's perspective. And I'm like, okay, we live in a society now that we need a trigger warning.
I don't have a problem with it. It's just more funny. Like,
I don't.
May I quote my best friend's girlfriend, who is both. She's like this weird middle ground of like sometimes she's feminazi, but sometimes she's awesome. And I find it's like most of the time she's awesome, and occasionally she goes into feminazi. But I'll say one of the awesome things she said was when my buddy, I'll leave them unnamed, but my best buddy, we were playing a D&D campaign, and the DM was using basically goblins that like it's kind of Goblin Slayer-esque, where they have to like, at least this is what I heard from Goblin Slayer, they have to like impregnate human women to have babies, right? Isn't that how it works? to do Offspring? Isn't that how it works?
It's kind of, but yeah.
I mean, I need to know. I don't want to be an idiot. Is that how it works?
It's a bizarre twist. I'm leaving as much detail out as possible.
Well,
You're not
way,
wrong.
My buddy
You're
was
not
like,
wrong, but
my buddy was really triggered
to
about that shit, and he was like, he kind of felt uncomfortable. And she's a film major. She watches all these like fucked up indie films and shit, and she was just like laughing at him like, "You're weak." That's the kind of person I enjoy watching anime with.
You're not wrong, but there's more to it than that. And for those who haven't read the manga, I'm leaving a little bit of shit out. But I can't wait to see season 2 adapted, just to see how many episodes need a trigger warning.
In Sword Art Online?
No, it's Goblin Slayer.
Oh, okay. Now,
because
who does Goblin Slayer?
I think it's White Fox.
Oh, okay.
The people made Steins Gate, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
But it is much worse than anything season 1 had.
Okay, interesting. I can't wait to see more people complaining on Twitter.
More fucked up.
I watched this and I felt physically ill.
I watched this and I felt physically ill. You should cancel this anime. It offends me on every... Grow the fuck up.
I mean, it's just a matter of separate real life from stories.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We live in a society where we can't separate facts from fiction.
Shut up, Joker.
Am I wrong?
Final thoughts on A1 Studios, and yes, you're right.
Here's what I'm actually concerned about moving forward with A1 Studios. The more they dive into the underworld shit for Sword Art Online is the more fucked up it's going to get. And that's where time slots become an issue even more. Because it gets progressively more and more and more fucked up.
Well, how about pacing? Have they been fucking that up at all?
Started on that. Don't even get me started on that.
Well, but that's kind of the point of the video. I'd love to get you started on that.
It's pacing wise, and I think a lot of the pacing wise for this series in particular, is like I was shocked that they involved that particular scene that Reki actually went on fucking record and apologized to the voice actresses. I thought they cut that completely the fuck out, because that was probably one of the most detailed fucked up scenes I've read in a light novel in my life. So yes, they left quite a bit out, but the fact that they included it at all shocked me. So the more they get into this Alicization and fucking underworld plot, the more fucked up shit's going to get. And that's where I'm going to be concerned if A1 either drops Sword Art, and if they drop Sword Art, they're going to have this fucking backlash of like, okay, why are you dropping this? Which also leads me to believe that they're probably going to drop quite a few other series as they get progressively more and more fucked up, because they have, like I said, they have the habit of picking up scraps. And a lot of the scraps that they pick up are really fucked up at the core. And that's where we get into this censorship in Japan being different than censorship here in America. This shit would be nothing in America.
Here's the question. How long until we just get to a point where television is moot in general and we can just fucking directly put it on places like Crunchyroll? You know what I mean? Like, how long till that happens? Because, like, think about that for a second, right? Like, how great would it be if they just had, like, two versions? Like, here's the censored version if that's what you want to watch, and here's the uncensored, and you can just choose when you click on the streaming website. I would love that.
Yeah, that would be a fucking ideal situation, but Japan has shit like this ingrained into their culture, TV ingrained into their culture.
Well, I mean, so did we. I mean, it's...
So did we, but it's in a completely different capacity there. Like, they have idol shows, they have all this other shit that they do in Japan.
That, you know, like
it could be all on the internet, and that's one thing I loved about Genlock is like the fucking VR chick.
Yeah.
That would be my ideal future. That would be like, okay, we
go into my waifu reality where women love me.
It's not even that capacity. It's just like, I would love to have a fucking reality where we can just plop on, snap on the screen, boom, here's this. And we won't have to worry about censorship. We won't have to worry about fucking, any
time
PC
slots or
bullshit.
channels
We
or
won't have to worry
yeah.
about any of that. That's the glorious thing about like Netflix and fucking premium sites like Crunchyroll is like
Hell yeah.
they are made for shit like that. They are fucking made for shit like that. But we don't utilize them properly
Well, I think
because
we're slowly gonna get to that point. I mean, look at how. Go ahead.
We're slowly getting to that point with like Netflix originals and shit like that. But we're not to the level that we need to be at to where we can ditch cable fully, where we can ditch broadcast television fully. Because
give it 10 years.
Give it 10 years and we'll have our local news, up on fucking Netflix and shit like that.
I don't know. It'll probably just be a general. Like, if we can, what we need to do, honestly, is make the internet like a resource similar to like the library, right? Where the internet is just like a thing that just everyone has. It's like the new, norm. And then like there could be things on the internet specifically for like, here's where you go to get your news streamed. Here's where you go to get, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that shit like that is what we need, because at this point, the more we get into the progressively fucked up shit, like there's a manga that I would love to see adapted, but I know would never get adapted because it involves basically a social suicide or a social death where they upload like the private lives of fucking the students and the teachers and shit like that.
Damn.
And it's just like, there's no way this would pass on fucking TV. There's no way that this would get fucking. That's the one I kept tweeting about and fucking talking about on Discord. It's like, you need to read this. You need to read this because this is the fucking society we're going towards. We are already kind of there.
I do think that we're going to be there eventually. In fact, like, for example, I think that this whole like manga app shit that's been happening recently is like a slow build towards that. For example, right, a lot of the problems that Shonen Jump has is that like shit gets leaked and then it comes out like 3 or 4 days on stream websites before it actually comes out in their magazine, right? If they just forego the fucking like physical release in general, then that wouldn't happen. Like, well, they should just release it on their website like every week. Like, all right, here's the digital Shonen Jump, boom. That's what Japan should just do that, and I think eventually they will, and that'll be the same thing with anime and everything.
And the shit like that is what we really need. Is fucking. It's what we need to move forward to. And it's definitely getting there right now. And the manga I'm talking about is called Sacrificial Vote in English. And I definitely recommend shit like that because that is what we will never see on broadcast TV. Something we will never see and adapted normally right now is, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I'll end off this video by saying I think that we're going in a good direction. Like, for example, there's been a lot of little changes that have helped studios to have better quality and better like work conditions for their animators. For example, most studios don't try to do that one episode a week forever thing. Like One Piece is about One Piece is one of the only manga or anime that still does that, and I wish they'd go to a more seasonal thing, right? So you look at how like My Hero is being done. That's perfect. They're able to adapt it without like stretching shit. Hold on a second. They're able to adapt shit without stretching stuff out. They're able to keep the animation really high quality, and I think that we're slowly going towards that path. And as we keep going down that path, considering if, for example, they're not constrained by TV, it having to be this length and we have to make time for commercial breaks and all that stuff. If they're just generally streaming it right towards the internet, that opens up a lot more creative freedom, and they hopefully could focus on the quality of the product rather than all these different constraints, ratings, time slot, yada, yada, yada.
So remember an era where we had animators literally dying at their desks?
Yeah, like 3 years ago? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, right? So we're definitely, moving in the right direction. But
final thoughts.
And I think this is what I think the change is we're losing a lot of these outsourced studios, right? Like in the last, I share a lot of this on Facebook, like the fucking from Anime News Network. A lot of the like studios that these companies would outsource, like, okay, we need 5,000 frames of this shit too. A lot of that's going away. Like ones that worked on Code Geass back when we were growing up, ones that worked on Cowboy Bebop, shit like that are closing down because we've went to this 1-core, 2-core fucking generation of anime, and they can't survive on, pumping out, such little product. So they're closing down, and then that's leaving, more work for the actual animators. But going on this fucking smaller schedule, they're not being overworked as much as, say, your game developers, your fucking, your people are working on the latest app. Shit like that is changing the industry for the better. But what's also making it much, much worse is we're still in an era of this regulation, and more of them are tightening down. And that's why a lot of companies are going like, you know what, fuck it. We'll go to the streaming site like Baki the Grappler, fucking Seven Deadly Sins skipped, American television, then went directly to fucking Netflix here for our dub. We're having a lot of these fucking, bigger name animes going to that. And if we go to that solely, we'll have a much, much better product. And we'll have less and less cut from the product. We'll have less and less, drawn away from, the quality of it. And we won't be constrained by, like you said, the fucking time slots and the needing to make room for advertisers here between this frame and this frame. And then coming back to like Kakura.
A perfect example is what they've done with Ruby recently by just putting it, like taking it off of YouTube and just doing it on their website. Yeah. So
that shit there is what we need to fucking go towards. And look at the quality change from Volume 5 to Volume 6 of Ruby.
Yes.
And tell them there's not a lot more polish, a lot more concern for detail. There's a lot more actually put into the thought of the plot itself than there was in fucking 5, where we need to fit in room for a fucking ad, and we need to fucking fit in room for fuck, we'll get demonetized anyway. Why did we bother?
Yeah, honestly. Yeah, so I think good points all around. And with that, peace.
Peace.